Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and we got quite the intro today. I want to start first and foremost by addressing what I'm wearing. If you're not watching, I decided to wear in honor of our guest, who we'll get to the part where she's a Walmart fashionista. I wore Target rival brand clothing. I wore my shirt from Target. It was the, closest thing to Walmart that I had in honor of our guest, who like I said, we'll get into the Walmart fashionista. So I got my Target shirt on. It's a Western wear, so pretty excited for that. And then I am very excited and honored to be hosting this episode because our guest, if things had gone to the left or the right just a little bit more, would not be here recording with us right now. She would be passed away. So it's really an honor to have this conversation. I think it highlights how chaotic life can be, how many hardships there are unexpectedly, and those chances that you just, it's going to be great. It lines up with, I'm releasing this on Mother's Day. Maybe you're listening to it any other day, but mothers are to be celebrated year round, and we're going to focus on some of the hardships of motherhood and conception. In fact, I just dropped a solo sermon on First Samuel chapter 1, Hannah's lamentations over her inability to conceive, and then the child she does have, Samuel. So just dropped that solo sermon. So God has been putting a lot of conception and pregnancy work into my hands right now. So this all lines up perfectly with today's guest, who's going to share a lot of her struggles, hardships, as well as successes and some of the greatness that has came with that. Malyri Ryan here with us. Now, I actually met your husband quite a while ago. He and I podcasted. We did school shooting safety, school shooting prevention, and talking about all the facets that go into that. A great conversation on the reality of what school shootings, domestic violence, targeted violence, and terrorism all come back to, which is mental health. And we'll be talking about mental health a lot today, including military mental health with your service background. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, just a little overview of who you are now. And I want you to take us back to being a very young woman deploying to the Middle East. I thought you and I were the same age. And then when I read your bio for Military Creator Con and talked about when you deployed to the Middle East, I was like, oh, well, I was like not born yet. So I'd love to hear a
Stop.
little bit about that.
At first it was a compliment, then I was like, oh, you're a grandma. Okay. Yeah, it's wild to think back that far on it wasn't that long ago, but it does feel like a lifetime ago. Just yeah, I joined the Marine Corps right after high school and I just wanted to do something different, like something that mattered. And I made it through. So I did 6 years there, went overseas, like pretty straight on as I got at my unit. And so that was fun. And that was another one where I didn't want to sit at my unit the whole time. I wanted to actually do something. So went overseas in Iraq. I was a diesel mechanic in the Marine Corps. And so that was fun. And yeah, fast forward to getting married. Is that where you're wanting me to go with this? Like,
I want to backtrack a little bit because
yeah.
for people who don't know you, obviously I've got to spend a little bit of time talking to you. And Malyri Ryan, ladies and gentlemen, is like a girly girl. Like she is like what you picture, classic white girl with the outfits and the like really that's like what you the energy she gives. If you've ever texted her on Instagram, like the energy is very girly girl. But you're talking about being in the Marines out of all the branches, right? You sound like an Air Force girl, but the Marines,
Yes.
right? You go to the Marines, a diesel mechanic, nonetheless. I mean,
Yes.
and this is back when, really the military was just getting integrated with men and women still, right? We've seen even just in the recent years some Marine integration. So it's still a changing process where we're seeing more and more women, not just as active duty, but as veterans sharing their stories. So how do you get into something like again, you're a woman who does fashionista stuff, right? So how do
Right.
you get that and then also work on diesel mechanics and talk and be in the Marines? Like, was there a duality of who you are and what you were doing, or is who you are now because of what you were doing? Like, were they existing at the same time, or are you two different people when you look back at your life?
Yeah, well, what's funny is I was working at a clothing store when I decided to join the military.
Okay.
But it really started out as my manager was in the Air Force. She was making extra money on the weekends in the reserves, like the Air Force.
Mm,
Maybe it was Air National Guard, I don't remember exactly, but it just sparked my interest because the amount of money she was making going to drill weekends was the amount of money we would make in 2 weeks. And then she was telling me
right.
about what they did, and I was like, that's just fascinating that you get to do that and just live this exciting life on the weekend. And so I started looking into it and I thought, well, there's the Marine Corps. And I was like, it's the hardest one. I should just try it and see if I make it. Because I really have the mindset of I'd rather go for the hardest thing and see if I can do it. And if I didn't, at least I tried. Kind of my
Mm.
like I'm more of that type. So joined or well, yeah, went to go talk to a recruiter and they were like, well, what do you want to be? You can be whatever you want. And, in true, my husband loves this story. He just thinks it's like a Malyri tale, but it was like, you can be whatever you want. I was like, do you have flight attendants? And he just, like, the room was dead silent and everyone laughed, like the loudest cackle ever. And they're like, everything except for that. So he was like, you can be a radio, like, I forget what it was, like a radio mechanic or a diesel mechanic. And I was like, well, I want to work on cars. Let's do that, So such a girly time, but
Right.
I think it really is, or not a girl. Like I was such a girly girl trying to join the manliest group of men.
Right, right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's just at the core of who I am. Like I always want to do my best and challenge myself and excel. Like I don't know.
And if
I don't know if that's
unboxing videos count as blue collar work, you've always been a blue
yes.
collar worker and you still are. So I mean, there's manual labor with the
There.
unboxing videos. You got to
Yeah.
pick up the box and open it and all that. So
I gotta go out and shop at Walmart. Like,
yeah, if you don't
that's
make your
hard work.
husband do it for you, I've heard
Yeah,
you mention
no,
that before
never.
too.
I don't trust his opinion.
Get trusted. Yeah, that's fair. I think it's just so interesting seeing like what, so there was no doubt or hesitation in your mind, like when you got to boot camp, where you like, maybe I made a mistake? Like, how did you feel throughout the whole process? Especially like, were you, once you got, because obviously in boot camp, you see a lot of other women, but once you get to wherever
Mhm.
your division or unit is, were you like the only woman there or were there other women? Like, how did that process kind of affect you as far as like what you were thinking and everything?
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely like on the bus going to boot camp. Like if you've ever seen any of the Marine documentaries, it's funny because it's exactly what happens in the documentaries. And so the girl next to me was like literally shaking, like uncontrollably shaking, and I was just thinking, I mean, I'm nervous, but it's people. Like we're gonna go run. We're gonna like pick up heavy stuff. Like this isn't
Right.
I don't know. It's not something scary necessarily, but definitely. So in boot camp, it was all girls. So my platoon in boot camp was all women, and we never really intermingled with the guys very much. But then, yeah, at my unit, I was one of four girls, and by the time I left, there had been about 6 to 8 that had kind of cycled through and gotten out, and so. Yeah, that's very different. And then you get treated differently until you prove yourself otherwise. And that was a big not testing ground. I don't want to say it was a testing ground for me, but it was a big confidence boost. And I can be a Christian woman. I can be a lady. I can be a lady, a Christian, and like in this man world and still excel. And that was a big, just like confidence booster for me.
Yeah, and so what was like your, for lack of better words, your military 9 to 5? Like, were you just out there doing manual labor on engines for different vehicles every day, or what kind of were you doing?
I was in the reserves. So it was 1 week in a month. I would go drive up to my unit. And I'm going to be honest, majority of the time, like if it was a drill weekend, we were sitting around doing nothing. And or we were inventorying tools. There wasn't a lot of equipment to work on. But once I deployed and we got activated and went to Iraq, that's when I actually got to work on stuff. And that was fun because that was literally like doing PMs, changing out the oil, changing out transmission fluid, changing out tires, working on electrical equipment for cranes and like all kinds of stuff. And we were retrograding in Iraq because they were trying to like close things down and move things over. And so it was cool to be a part of that and actually getting to work on the actual equipment that we had been trained on. But to be honest, I wouldn't have really known my job even coming out of school if it hadn't been for the civilian contractors that were there with us. So it was like
Mm.
on the job training every day.
So, just for some historical perspective, when exactly were you sent to Iraq? Like, what was the combat situation like at that time?
It was in 2009, and so there wasn't I we were I was on base 99.9% of the time. I only got to go off once. There were, so I wasn't in any combat or things like that. It was a combat zone. But as far as like what was going on outside, I don't really know. I just know they were shooting mortars at our base, not daily, but like often enough that they didn't bother you anymore. Such
Right.
a weird lifestyle, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
So were any of the vehicles you're working on ones that came back? Were you doing any salvage work at all?
No, I was a lot of it was just it was fixing up equipment that they and it was what I worked on was construction equipment. So trams, there was a big crane. It was mostly trams, cranes, forklifts, things that we were like
Mm.
fixing. And a lot of it was like I was saying, like changing out the transmission fluid or we changed out a transmission on a big tram one time. And a lot of it was fixing things that had been limping along for a long time, like fixing the headlights or trying to get certain switches to work. So it wasn't like something blew up
Oh,
and they
okay.
brought it in and we had to fix it. It wasn't that exciting.
And then of course everyone is probably thinking the same question. Do you change your own oil right now, like on your vehicles?
I don't. I should. I know. I
Yeah.
always said I would.
Right. Do you pay someone to do it or you make your husband do it?
He used to do it, but not anymore. Like now I don't know. It's like we moved to Florida and now we're city people. I
Um,
grew up in Oklahoma and I'm like, in Oklahoma, we were country folk and now we're in Florida and we're like city people.
which means you went from doing it yourself to we could just pay someone to do this. Just
Yeah. And we have
convenience.
a friend from church who is a mechanic. So it just makes sense
Oh,
to
okay.
support him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So let's fast forward. We talked a little bit about your combat era and how long were you in for again?
I did 6 years in the reserves.
What was the deciding factor about getting out?
Wanting to be a mom. I was ready to, I always say, and I told my CO, because my CO and my staff sergeant brought me in the office and they're like, Ryan, we need people like you. We want you to stay. How much money can we give you for you to stay? And I was like, I'm really flattered, but you people are not, I'm ready to be Mrs. Ryan instead of Sergeant Ryan. And
Mm.
that was really it. I just was ready to get back into, wife life, like a normal wife, trying to be a normal wife, and then try to start a family. That was our goal.
So what was it about being a military wife and mom that kind of you were, I guess, not disinterested in? So like why did you find it more beneficial to be a mom outside of the service rather than in?
Well, and yeah, we hadn't had kids yet, just to make that
Yeah.
clarification. But I mean, it's just, I always wanted to be a stay at home mom. Always have wanted to homeschool our kids, like just have a more, I don't know what maybe the exact technical term is, but kind of like more of a classic, like old school,
Yeah, traditional.
traditional. Yeah, like traditional household is what we had always kind of wanted and talked about. So it was more about that.
No, that's completely understandable. I just ask because I know some people choose to stay in. They find it more beneficial to have a family while in, and some people will get out. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you went out, you were tried working, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna leave this to whoever else, and I'm gonna stay home and do my thing. Which hey, if I could do it, I would do it too, you know. So I totally
Yeah.
get that, and
Yeah.
I know, and I've done plenty of interviews on this podcast about how complicated being in the service and trying to be a parent can
Mm,
be. We've talked about a lot of the difficulties with that throughout the
yeah.
various branches, especially when you're trying to start a family. And I think one of the
Yeah.
things the military needs to work on, I talk about, people ask me how would you fix the military? And one of the things is like
Mm.
making that ideal career path more feasible. So like for people, because I don't know if you did it, but we have the dream sheet, kind of like if you could be stationed in these top three places,
Oh,
what are they, right? The dream
right.
sheets, and it's like doing that, but for a much longer view. So, like for me, if I could have sat down with the
Mm.
Navy and said, "Hey, at some point, I really want to have a wife and kids, and I prefer a short tour for maybe when they're from this age, this age, or whatever it is, or to establish it." Like I think setting that up could make it more feasible to do. But right now, I think there's a lot of just you have a kid and then they're like, okay, you got to go here, here. You got to like kind of fight and fill out paperwork and do so much stuff to try and get stationed in a way that's more effective for your family. So I think that's something
Oh,
that
yeah.
the military needs to work on. But you talk about getting out to start your parenting journey. So I'd love for you to share about that and kind of the difficulties, the hardships, and then also the successes with that.
Yeah. Well, I always thought I'd be a young mom because I got married really young. I got married at 19, right out of like pretty much right after boot camp. I got married. So, yeah, obviously thought I'd be a young mom, but it took us a really long time to have children. He's almost 3. He'll be 3 in July. And we've been married for 18 years. So it took us a really long time. But looking back, I think about how God's timing is always perfect. And while I obviously would have liked to have children earlier on and it took us forever, I see his hand in it all, but it wasn't until we moved to Florida that we ended up starting to go to doctors and find out what was going on, if what was wrong. And I got checked out and they found a couple of things, but they didn't find anything that they thought would really interfere. And then my husband got checked out and they found a few more things. And so they ended up coming back that our only option was IVF if we wanted to have a child of our own. And so, yeah, so we pursued IVF.
Okay.
That's where you're wanting me to go, right?
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
talk about that journey. Obviously, not everyone is quite familiar with IVF and the difficulties in the process of it and how that works. So could you kind of break down what was going through your mind during that whole process?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like maybe the elephant in the room, if anyone does know, I feel like IVF is so controversial and it's controversial in the Christian space. And I get it because I feel like it's controversial and there are a lot of controversial things. And my personal opinion is there's moral ways to do it and there's not moral ways to do it. And so we've always really tried to follow what we believe is right in God's eyes on how we do it. And so we first talked about it a lot and talked through it and prayed about it and ended up deciding to go through with it. So it's basically just where you it's like, how do I say it? So I'm sounding like a science class, but it's like they take an egg and they take a sperm and they put it together in a petri dish and how it grows, like they get it to grow, which is naturally, like they're not doing anything weird. It's doing its thing.
Right.
And then at a certain point in time, they can look at it under a microscope, like you think back to 8th grade science class where you're looking at cells. They can look at that and they can see the grade of the egg and or the embryo and see if it's viable, like if it is dividing, like if the cells are dividing and everything like it should. And then there's this whole process of medications and like injections that you're doing to trick your body into thinking that it's pregnant. And then they put that embryo in at the exact time in your cycle that it would have like, it would not typically naturally, what's the word? Implant into your uterus and signal to your body that you're pregnant. And so they do that. And then you're doing these shots to keep your body up like it's pregnant. Hey, I'm pregnant. We're making these hormones. And then you have a baby. Like it works or it doesn't work. And so for us on our first try, it went perfectly. We had a little boy. He's almost 3. And it was a really great experience the first time around.
There was no complications with the birthing process or anything like that.
No, it was great, literally perfect. And I can look back now today and be like, I'm so much more grateful for that ever than even I thought that I was. Like I was so grateful because I there was such a long time where I didn't know if being a mom was in the cards for me. And once that worked, I was obviously super grateful to be a mom, and because I mean, when you're in the trenches of trying to conceive, like it's a very lonely, hard space to be in when you're a woman and you're like, this is my job. Like this is the punishment God gave me in the garden, and this is my job as a wife. Like this is what I was created for, to be my husband's help me and to create life and then help both of them. And so it's a hard space when you're feeling like you're not able to even do the simplest, like most, what's the
Yeah.
word, most natural task that you've been given. And so that's funny you mentioned Hannah because I literally for a really long time I prayed every single day for a child. and I just was trying to hang on to it, so
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like I said, I just did a whole sermon on her and talked about like
yeah,
especially the frustrations of a mother not being able to conceive, especially those nowadays. Of course, we have a lot
yeah,
of mindsets of women who don't want to give birth and they reject that kind of stuff and all that stuff. And
yeah,
but for those women who do really want to have children to be struggling with it, and then to see women who don't want children, popping out babies left and right can be very frustrating. So you
yeah.
talked about going through that personally, experiencing that. What advice would you give to someone if they're listening right now and they're a mother who is struggling to conceive, or a woman who wants to be a mother and is struggling to conceive? What kind of helped get you through that difficulty?
Really, it was just I had to keep telling myself, even if God is still good. So, in whatever situation, whether God was going to bless us with a child, He's still good, He's great, And if God decided that children weren't in the cards for me, in that way of carrying a child on my own and having a little bit of me and a little bit of Seth in one person. No, because some of us like maybe the world can't handle a Seth and a Malyri. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what it is, but
Right.
like because Seth, so but it was really just hanging on to. Com- I say hanging on. It was really 100% fully trusting God and His wisdom over what I want. And that's hard, but I think that that's just the type of faith that you see in the Bible. And that's I was also just at the end of it just thinking, or throughout it all just thinking, I want to glorify God. I want God to be proud of me. Maybe that's not the right terminology, but that was what was going through my head, is that if this is a trial, I want to walk through the trial. And no, I wasn't perfect. There was times where I was sad and mad and things like that, which I
Right, of
think
course.
obviously it's okay to have your feelings, but just hanging on to the truth that God is good no matter what.
Yeah, and like you said, that can be really difficult to do through those difficult times, especially
Yeah.
if you don't already, and it seems in your case, like you already had a strong faith foundation, which if you are someone
Mm-hmm.
who is kind of on that path of questioning it or not having
Right.
as strong of a relationship with God, that can really strain that, or in some cases push closer together because, I've been in, I won't say a similar situation as that one. I haven't tried to conceive myself, but in the case of like God was all I had to lean on. Like all I could do was
Yeah.
say, God is all I have. I can't, control X, Y, Z or ABC. I'm going to try and do what I can on my end and, know that God's moving on his end. And so you talked about the smoothness of this and the gratefulness at the end, but then now having more appreciation. And obviously I know why, but I'd love for you to fill us in on why, which is the future pregnancies that you had difficulties and hardships with.
Yeah. Okay. And this is the part I like. Some days I cry and some days I don't. So we don't know which Mallory you're going to get today. But yeah. So the first one went great and perfect. And it was a little scary because we had 6 embryos left. And we were like, oh, so a little backtrack before that. They tell you, so the statistics is basically for every 3 embryos, you get one live birth. And so they had told us, just so you know, it's probably going to take 3 tries before you have one. And so for ours to work on the first try, we were like, oh no, like, does that mean we're going to have 6 children? Like, okay, I mean, God, whatever God's plan, And so then we tried again and it didn't work. And that one was a little more heartbreaking, I think, for me. Obviously Seth too, but it was a little girl and it was our only little girl embryo that was of good grade. And so that one was hard. And then we tried again a few months after that. We tried a little boy and it was going great. I got pregnant, it worked out. I was feeling sick, like all the things. And then it wasn't until September of last year, I went to my doctor's appointment and it was just a routine, like check the heartbeat, like do all this stuff. And they were checking the heartbeat and I had no, I just had no clue. And she's checking the heartbeat and she's not able to find it. And I just she was trying to be, I feel so bad for her. She was just trying to be so positive. And she was like, well, she's like, sometimes they're just, they're hiding in there. And anyway, we couldn't find the heartbeat. So she's like, well, we're going to do an ultrasound just to make sure. And so we did an ultrasound, and it was like this gut wrenching moment where the lady doing the ultrasound was like, there's no heartbeat. And I don't know, it's something I never knew the hurt of like losing a child. It's like people from church lose children. You hear things like that, like people miscarrying a baby, and you hear about it and you feel sorry for them, and you're like, oh, that's so sad. But you don't know the gut wrenching like hurt until you're a mom. I think, you're a mom and it's your baby, and you're like, oh, now I get it. And so I feel bad for my friends. Like, if I know, it's like, now I know the pain and now I can
Right.
love them better, But so they were just, that we lost the baby, and I was far enough along that they said I would have to deliver him, or another option that I just felt like was not what I would choose. Like, it just hurt my heart to think about doing it another way. And so I had to schedule to go into the hospital and deliver him in the hospital. And that was obviously it was just kind of like super sad thing after another thing, right? Like, you find out your baby is dead and you literally like see them on the ultrasound. You don't hear a heartbeat, like all of that. And then now you have to go into the hospital and deliver this baby that's not alive. And that was another terrible day. And then you're wanting me to tell like the full story of like almost dying, right? Like
Yes.
all of that. Okay. But then, so I delivered the baby, and then I was hemorrhaging really bad, and they were able to get the bleeding to stop, and I was stabilized. So my blood wasn't low enough to do the words are leaving my brain.
Like a blood transfusion.
Transfusion. I was like, I know it starts with a T. But yeah, it wasn't left to do a blood transfusion, but I was able to go home the next day. But what kept happening is I kept passing out every time I would try to sit up, or every time I would try to sit up, I would pass out, throw up, like this whole thing. It was wild. I probably passed out like 10 times after delivering our son. And anyway, they moved me to a room. I got to go home the next day. That day was also depressing because they were like, do you want to see your baby? And they brought him in I don't know if I'm getting too morbid, but they brought him in a like literal cleaned out empty ice cream tub, and it just broke my heart. So maybe that was TMI. If you want to cut it, it's okay.
No, I was worried you were gonna say a plastic bag or
Yeah,
something
well, yeah, I
adjacent,
guess
and
it was
that
a
was pretty
plastic.
adjacent to it. So
Yeah, it was
yeah,
still just, she walks in with this tub and you're like, my baby. Because as a mom, you're like, I know that, he was 20 weeks old, and that's halfway. He looked he looked just like a little baby. And while I knew that like he's safe in the arms of Jesus and receiving the comfort, like only we don't even know the kind of comfort we've never felt before, it still is just heartbreaking that his little body was just in there, because as a mom you just naturally want to care for your
right.
child. And but anyway, so I go home, and obviously we're trying to deal with all the feelings of that, and I started bleeding again, and it was pretty bad. My husband, we rushed to the ER, and yeah, my doctor was like, "You're losing a lot of blood," and he's like, "So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in, we're gonna do a couple of things to try and get the bleeding to stop." And he's like, "Just so you know, worst case scenario, this is super rare, but we might have to do a hysterectomy and take your uterus out, like obviously to save your life." And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, that'll never happen. That's not even on my radar. And so I go in, they do the surgery. Obviously, I have no idea how long I'm under, but when I wake up, my stomach is burning. And a funny caveat while we're in this depressing story, but I was dreaming of shopping at Target. Isn't that
Interesting.
I know. So when I woke up like from the anesthesia, I'm like, shopping at Target is what I remember dreaming about. But
Mm.
anyway, I didn't see Jesus. It was Target, so I don't know. But anyway, I my stomach was burning, and so I knew instantly, and my literal first thought, I'm like laying there and I was like, dang it. That's literally what I said. So, and then I guess my husband had, I finally got to meet up with him, and he was like, yeah, they said you almost died. And my doctor came in and he was like, so obviously, we had to take your uterus, and they didn't do a full hysterectomy. I know we're getting so girly over here, but it didn't throw me into menopause. So I'm still like, my
Yeah.
body is still its age, if that makes any sense. But,
Yeah, no, because
um,
you never want to get the full thing removed because then it really throws off your hormones and I believe it can increase cancer risk and other stuff. Your husband's side of the story, from what I recall, was that they actually told him before you because he was out in the waiting room and the doctor
yeah,
said, "Don't tell your wife. We're going to tell her that we removed her uterus." And they went in there and you already knew, as you just shared with us, like you could just
yeah,
feel it. And yes, I remember him
yeah.
telling me that.
Yeah, because I guess they can't give you any medication, like pain medication.
Mm.
So you wake up and you literally can just feel you know what
And
happened,
was the
but
bleeding from your uterus? Is that where you kept were you bleeding, like was it physically exiting your body or was it internal
yeah.
bleeding?
No, yeah, it
It
was
was just
physically
coming out all over.
yeah,
Okay.
well, it was clotting, and
Mm.
yeah, it's so gross. And it was clotting initially, and then the clots broke off, and then that was where it was literally just like pouring out. It was horrible. It was
So was it
go ahead.
mistakable as a period at first? Were you like, "Oh, I'm just like reacting," or you were like, "No, something's wrong."
No, something was wrong. Yeah, it was way different. I actually, when the bleeding started, like when all of that kind of happened, it was so bad, and I literally just was feeling the life kind of draining out of me. And it was such a weird, it's hard to describe, but I knew in my mind that when I told my husband, I was like, we just need to go. Like, I was like, this is bad. I
Mm.
felt weird. And I literally went over and I kissed my son, and I thought I was kissing him for the last time. I thought it was very likely that I was kissing him for the last time. And that was a very weird moment, because I go into the living room. He's sitting on the couch watching like a Disney movie with his grandma. And I kissed him on the cheek. And of course, he's not really paying attention to me, but there was like this flash of his life and my motherhood that kind of went through my mind. And I was like, okay, well, I know there's a lot of pictures on my phone and there's a lot of videos, and hopefully he'll remember me. Like, hopefully, hopefully in
Wow.
some way, shape, or form, I have helped him
Yeah.
grow into a good man.
Yeah, that's such a crazy thought to have that like
I know.
will my children even remember me, and that's not anything
Yeah.
any parent wants to think about, at least not until they're much, much older. So,
Right. Yeah.
that is crazy. And I want to go back to, you mentioned a little girl that you had difficulty with. What was the issue with that? Like the embryo would not implant, or because you didn't have to deliver from what I'm tracking. So what was the issue with that
Right.
one?
Yeah, that one just didn't implant. And right. Like, I think as a woman, you're always trying to find the reason why for things. And I was
Yeah.
sick. I had been pretty sick, and I had been doing all this medicines to lead up to the transfer. And it's a lot of money. And I was like, I'm sick, but I think I'm okay. And
Mm.
I didn't have a fever. So there's a lot of like different science about all that stuff. But I went ahead and did it anyway. And like, looking back, I wish that I had waited, but
Like your
I
body just
obviously can't
wasn't
change.
ready. Because I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like these have been pretty back to back to back, with the exception of, your first kid too. Was the little
The two.
girl
Yeah.
like right after, or was like 2, 3 years afterward?
Oh, so this was all last year that we
Okay.
tried
Yeah.
again.
So you had
And we,
waited quite some time between the birth of your first son and then the other ones.
yeah. Yeah. About a year and a half, almost. Yeah. A year and a half ish.
So, because I'm not an IVF expert, they just kept
It's
like
okay.
your embryos in like a jar for like 2 years while you waited. Like, no, I'm just serious because you made all the
It's a
embryos the first
shoebox.
time,
Come
right?
on.
But they
Um,
kept them all that time.
yeah, they actually, I have three little children right now frozen in Tampa, and I pay, what's it,
A
like
lot of money.
$80 a month to rent them in a little cryogenic storage unit.
Wow. Yeah, they talk
It's
about
like a
kids being an
science movie.
investment. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. And then I don't know how much you want to share, but I know, and in case anyone is listening and called to it, you are looking for surrogate mothers for those children, correct?
Yeah, and we actually have one. We have a sweetest friend that is going to be doing it for us, hopefully. She's going through the process right now, and she just passed the initial like paperwork phase, and then she's about to start the physical testing where they just kind of seeing how her body is going to react to stuff and make sure that it's all good. But she's the sweetest soul, and I can't believe that she, I don't know, it's just such a selfless thing. And while it's not the journey I would have chosen for myself, obviously, I just it's like you see God's hand in that, like using others to help carry the burden, and it's special.
Yeah, I know we last spoke, we were talking about a couple of different people who had reached out to you, and I think it's so amazing to see. Again, I can't even imagine because I'm not a woman, but carrying another woman's child and doing that, especially
Yeah.
what's so, I call it strange and ironic, is I've seen a lot of the women who volunteer for this don't want kids themselves, but they'll
Hmm.
use what they have to make a kid for someone else. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how has that? Could you talk about kind of how it's kind of shaped your journey of faith?
I mean, yeah, I would say this, you didn't necessarily ask about this, but just something that I think is probably really relatable. And if someone is going through something like this, but in the beginning, it was just really gut wrenching, not only losing a child, but then having the ability to have children be taken away from you because you're
Right,
not that that's where my value is, but a little, I alluded to that a little bit
right,
earlier on, but, and then you're just thinking of that is that you, now the beauty of carrying your child is taken away from you because that becomes such a sacred thing and it's so special and you just it's the miracle of life, like God designed it and it's amazing, but that being taken away is pretty hard. And then it was just like who would do that, like who would want to do that for someone else and not even get to reap the benefits of it
right,
because it's, I mean, there's some women who love being pregnant, and I mean, I enjoyed being pregnant. It wasn't terrible, but I know a lot of people who pregnancy is horrible for them. It's really hard.
yeah,
They're obviously grateful to be able to have a child, but it's a rough time. And so you're just thinking, who would want to do that? Who would want to like go through childbirth, like all that stuff, and just be like,
right
here's
for
your
someone
baby.
else.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it took it felt for a long time like that, like who would want to do that. And in the beginning there was a lot of crickets when we would talk about it. There was a lot of people that were just kind of
Right,
like, I'll be praying for you, and you're like, thanks.
right,
Like, do you want to have my baby for me? Like, as if you're gonna ever ask someone that point blank.
yeah.
Like,
So
never,
it's a
I
good
would never.
icebreaker.
Yeah, right, like,
Yeah, but I think
no but thanks. you
I
know
feel especially bad for people in your situation during this time period where we kind of mentioned earlier. We're seeing people, so many people use birth control or closing their tubes or whatever it may be to get
Mm,
rid of their ability to conceive and have children. And because people want
right.
to create sex into a pastime activity rather than a reproductive function. And so I feel like now you're in a day and age where you're inundated with so many people who are just throwing it away when you
Mm,
can't have it. So I think it's especially difficult. And that kind of leads us towards the third part of the conversation, which is
yeah.
talking about what you do now with what we call and some people call conservative clothing, not conservative in the political sense, but in the modesty sense. You
Yeah.
talk a lot about clothing and trying to be a fashion influencer who, unlike most of the fashion we see online, a majority of it is sexualized, is pushing, that sexualization is freedom and liberty and makes women goddess. You have a much
Mm,
different approach. And you have a good following. You have people who personally even meet up with you, or that
mhm.
you've formed relationships with who are inspired by what you do. So I'd love for you to go into this current part of your life that you've been doing for quite a while as well, which was
Yeah.
affected by some of the difficulties you went through. So could you tell us kind of what inspired you into that journey?
Yeah. I guess it's, we're all on social media, we're all on Pinterest and the girl world, you're always kind of looking for the newest trend and what's cute and how can I create that in my closet or what do I need to go buy to look cute like her. And I would see these cute outfits on Pinterest and then you go to like buy the items and it's like a $30 white t-shirt and you're just like, who's paying $30 for a white shirt? And
Right.
so that was really what kind of sparked it is I've always loved fashion and I've always tried to be modest and I know everyone there's like a spectrum of what everyone thinks what modesty is for you and
Yeah,
how
for
you
sure.
were raised. But I always loved trying to recreate things or think of my own kind of outfit and but always on a very poor budget. Like I was raised very poor. We got our clothes from Walmart or garage sales or mostly hand-me-downs. And so I started doing that. I just started sharing essentially like a get the look for less. And that's kind of like a phrase that's thrown around a lot now, but back then nobody was really doing that. And so that was what was fun is it was just putting together a cute outfit but from Walmart and as it's grown Walmart has gotten really popular and it's like now everyone is wearing Walmart and it's cool, it's just cool to see and
But you want
yeah,
everyone to know you were the trendsetter, not the person who hopped on the bandwagon. You want to
I
make it
mean maybe
clear,
a
like
little
you were
but
doing it first.
I was one of them.
You're retro, you're
um
vintage. You were cool before it
yeah,
was
hey,
cool.
yeah. You young people.
Well, I just say that. So I know
I
that we
know.
talked a lot about Walmart. Are there any other brands that you partner up with or places that you shop at that you also like as a go-to?
I do like going to Target, so mainly
Every woman
Walmart
in the
and
world likes going to Target, and it's
yeah.
heaven to them, which is probably why you saw it during your vision. You're like, it's heaven because
I know.
every woman thinks Target. Like, people, especially at least what I've seen with Gen Z, millennials, Gen Z, and younger
Mm,
generations, like they're
yeah.
going on Target dates, and they'll both go
Oh yeah.
together, and they'll make little baskets for each other with different items, or they go to the $5 section in the
Tell me what we
beginning.
do.
Right. I have been a victim or survivor of that $5 section right in the front because you go in and they got
I know.
sometimes it's just random stuff. Sometimes I don't know who made
Yeah.
it or why, but I always end up
Right.
leaving with some little knickknack or something because it's only $5 and
Right.
whatnot. But they've got some good stuff. Like I said, for my clothes, I don't know. I just find it somehow. I couldn't tell you. I hate it because I always have an interesting shirt or something, and someone says, "Where
Right.
did you get that?" And I never have any answer. I think of like 100 different places. I'm like, I have no idea.
And like
Unless
maybe it
it's a
was the thrift
graphic
store.
T-shirt, then it was buy
Yeah.
one get two free. Discard rack at Hot Topic.
Right.
That's my
Yes.
go-to if I want to pick up in bulk, like 18 shirts that
In
no one's ever
bulk.
seen and no one wants. But as far
Yeah.
as like all
Right.
my like I happen to know this one was from Target, but all my other Hawaiian shirts or dress shirts, they could be from some antique mall in like Mississippi, or they could be from like an actual mall, or
Yeah.
I have no idea. And I hate not being able to tell people where I got it from because people are like, I want to buy that. Where did you get it?
I
Now,
mean, yeah.
I was gonna say some of my stuff is from online. Do you do in
Right.
person only, or do you risk online shopping? What's your view on that?
Oh no. Yeah. I definitely do a lot of online. And then what? I mean, once you buy a brand enough, you figure out like how the clothing fits and stuff like that. But after COVID, it really switched to more online because I
Mm,
used to go into the store and then try on the new stuff and take
right.
pictures or film it. And now I do a lot more online stuff for sure.
How do you keep track of the cycles? Like, hey, the new spring collection's here, the summer's collection here. Where do you get that information from?
Dude,
Or if that's a
the
trade
amount,
secret, you don't have to tell.
no, the amount of time, and it's changed now that I'm a mom. I don't have all of the time to just sit there, but the amount of time I would and do scroll on Walmart.com, like I don't know every single item, but I could go to Walmart with you. Like we could go to Walmart and I could tell you everything that's brand new and like say like, oh, that's old, like that's old. Like I can just scan the store and I go so often and I know the know what is there that I can just kind of scan and just know what's new. Like if it's a new color in the shoe, I know it. And I don't know.
On your resume as special skill set, like very interesting ability to have. And
It's nothing to brag about. Let's just say that.
hey, there's people with stranger or more obtuse skills than that. So I mean, it definitely
Yeah.
works. And being a mother, I know you have the one kid. And are you in charge of his clothing, or have you left that to dad? Like, what's the deal? Are you
Mm.
thinking of making a separate account for like how to dress your kids better for less? Like, what's going on in your mind?
No, I mean I definitely try to dress him and I buy his clothes, but Seth will sometimes buy him a couple of things. But yeah, I'm normally the one dressing him. If he looks a little funky or something doesn't match, it was probably grandma that put the outfit together.
Yeah,
Really.
that's seems to be common because I'll tell you, like, if I were to look at my clothes right now and people are like, "Oh, where did you get that one or that one?" I'd be like, "That was my grandma said that I would be a handsome young man who got all the ladies if I wore that." And I don't know, they just
Yes.
I don't know where grandmas get their fashion sense from, if it's just outdated
Yeah.
or they're just I don't know. I've got my grandma got me the brightest neon pink polo in existence. Like if you shine a light on it, it like
Okay.
I a glowing pink.
Like a glow.
Like,
Yeah.
yes, it's like neon pink, and I was like,
That's
it's
funny.
great if I never want to get lost at something. I will
Yeah.
say, but it's a little too bright. I need something a little more muted. It's too bright. I need something a
She
little
wants you
more
to stand
muted, a
out.
little more that could fit into events, a little more pastel maybe.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, so
She's cute.
right. And I don't know. Sometimes we're just walking and my grandma will see something and be like, there it is. I'm like, nah, she's like, well, she just gets it anyway. And or you get it
She's
for Christmas or
cute.
your birthday and you can't return it. And
Yes.
yeah, and I think that's where some of my strangest underwear has come from as well.
Oh
It's
my.
grandparents or parents buying just like the most weird images. Like I've got the ones I'm wearing right now to be TMI.
I
There
don't
is
want to know.
it's a whole ocean barrier reef of fish and coral and stuff. And I'm pretty sure my grandma and my mom got that from me. Special
It's like
bamboo
Finding Nemo on
wicker
there.
cooling technology. Like that's your podcast
Okay.
fun fact of the day. You know,
It uses the wind from the ocean to cool
right?
you
It's
down.
the harness the sea breeze.
Yes.
Yeah, so you talk
That's
about
funny.
this lifestyle you're living now. You were a diesel mechanic, Marine,
Mm.
turned influencer, fashionista mom. What were some of the learning curves when it comes to, and in fact, you just spoke at Military Creator Con actually as a speaker about kind of like the adjustment of becoming someone who posts online, who records online, who does all this content.
Mm.
What kind of roles and responsibilities or hardships did it come with that you did not anticipate or have been the most difficult and challenging to you?
Mm. Yeah. I don't get a lot of mean comments, but the handful of mean comments I've gotten in over the years just live rent free in my mind. And that's
Yeah.
hard to. There's a lot of really sweet comments that I get and a lot of stories and things like people will share that are really impactful. But I think that there's a lot of things, but I think as of late, the I'm blaming the devil for it because I think that he doesn't want me to shine my light. And so that I've had a lot of this internal monologue just going on saying that I shouldn't, that nobody wants to hear what I have to say, that I'm not a good
Mm,
speaker, that I just say like all the time, or a lot of things like that, where it just makes you feel like you shouldn't put yourself out there. Where when I first started my page, I didn't think about any of that stuff. I just literally shared stuff. And so I think it's a lot of trying to be a people pleaser and that just dims your light when you're trying to please people because you're never going to no matter what you say. And then the people who have started following you for who you are and who like the real you when you start
right.
dimming your light, like I think they notice it too. And then yeah, um
Yeah,
it's
so
just
shout
hard.
out to speaking of Marines, Reed Jones and I had a conversation like this morning because
Yeah.
he and I are in the same boat as you with the hate comments. In fact, he
Ugh.
was posting an anti-racism thing because I believe he's also in an interracial couple relationship, and he
Okay.
was we was talking about anti-racism, how there's just so much racism in the world, and it keeps like he was talking about that, and he got hate comments degrading his voice, accusing him of stolen valor, all this stuff to detract from his message,
Right.
And I was talking to him because I got pro human trafficking comments because I post anti-human trafficking content, and I got some toxic males who were like, real men in the
Yeah.
church, would support human trafficking, or they don't care about whether coffee is ethically sourced or not. I had
Hmm.
someone who tried to make anti-Jesus comments on my faith-based
Yeah.
content yesterday. They spelled
Right.
Jesus wrong, so I couldn't even really take that one. I actually laughed at because they spelled Jesus wrong.
Right.
Like they were
Yeah.
like, you're typing so fast and angry you can't even spell Jesus right. But I get it all the
Right.
time. I had people who gave me backlash because I said, using excessive amounts of drugs, alcohol, or sex to cope negatively and suppress something
Hmm.
is bad. I was talking about life advice. People were mad that I said that, you know, and I really like Massimo Rigodi said it great when he and I were recording about addiction recovery. He goes, Mr. Whiskey,
Hmm.
someone's going to look at this conversation between you and I. They're going to make fun of your hat or my curly hair to not pay attention to the message, because the message a
Yeah.
lot of times is it's reaching the person. They're either in defensiveness or because they don't want to be held accountable, lashing out. Or, as
Yeah.
Reed Jones and I discussed this morning, some people just hate to hate. There is no motivation, there's
Yeah.
no understanding their psychology, there's no wound they're covering up. They just like to spread hatred and whatever. And typically, a lot of the
Hmm.
comments that are from these sources are anonymous names or profile pictures. Sometimes it's a real person, but usually not someone
Right.
who can do what we're doing or has done what we're doing. I
Right.
think what you're doing is it doesn't have to be politically associated or religiously associated, but people are going to attach that to it to have a
Yeah.
reason to hate or to make hatred, right? Because at the end of the day, you're just showing different style of fashion. Whether people want
Right.
to say this is Christian forced or this is, Republican or conservative, they're going to attach whatever label they can to it to have an excuse to tear
Yeah.
it down. And it's sad to see, especially we see so much support again for women who are pushing
Mm.
forward lingerie, sexualized clothing
Yes.
for normal wear, and all this
Right.
other content, promoting OnlyFans, and then they're gonna push down someone just promoting a different fashion style. Not even,
Right.
it's not like your account is made to bash on those other accounts. It just exists
Right.
as its own entity doing its own thing, but people are gonna make it an anti. And so I think it,
Yeah.
it, it is spiritual warfare because, like I said,
Mm.
anytime I post something that's faith based, it instantly gets disliked and hate comments within 5 minutes of publication. If I post
Mm.
something non faith based, if it gets dislikes or any hateful comments, it's not for quite a while. But if it's faith based, I mean, instantly, it really is
Yeah.
spiritual warfare. And so, as we talk about that, what has kind of helped you deal with that? Because I'm in the same boat where I had someone reach out and say, an episode of your podcast changed my life. But I think about
Oh.
that one a lot less than the guys who were like, real men, human traffic. Like, it's hard not to
Yeah.
focus on those negative comments so much more. I had someone tell me I should stick to milking cow udders. So it's hard not to think about those ones compared to the positive. So has it been
Yeah.
faith that really reinforces you? Has it been the support of your loved ones? Has it been like, maybe
Mm.
writing it down? What has kind of been your go-to method for dealing with this?
I honestly, I've just been quiet. It's not the best. It's not what I would recommend someone to do, but I mean, I've never been super loudly political. I've never been
Yeah.
super loudly Christian necessarily. Like, I definitely will post like my Bible studies and like about whatever Bible study I'm doing, I'll post about it in my story, or I might do a post about my favorite Bible studies or different things like that. But I don't typically get on and talk about controversial things because that's not what I started my page for. And for me personally, I'm not here to argue with people. And and I think of that like just casting your pearls before a swine. Like there's a way to do it. There's a way to like share a message and to like preach a lesson, and just arguing and fighting online. And I'm like, no one's coming to Jesus when you guys are just arguing about stuff,
Mm.
And I've felt very convicted to share more about my beliefs. And that's something I'll be honest with you, I've just been nervous to do. Like the devil has been kind of holding me back from that. And I've been listening to him. Like he's not like just him, but there's all these negative thoughts in my mind. And then I've been nervous to share because you see so many things going on. You see, I mean, you think of the biggest one is Charlie Kirk, and I'm not trying to bring that up and open up a whole can of worms, but just that you just see people doing good things. And I mean, there's plenty of stories in the Bible filled with that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And, but then I also think like, I don't want to be like Peter and I don't want to deny Christ, you know, and I'm like, I'll never deny you. And then here I am like not talking about it, not sharing the gospel when I have a
Mm,
platform. But I don't know, I've struggling with that. It's like, I'm not trying to be a preacher, but I want to shine the light of Christ also, you know, and
right.
I
Not
mean, I definitely have people who will comment, and everyone, I feel like the people who follow me know I'm a Christian, and I definitely share my beliefs on like with IVF and how we've dealt with it. And I've gotten some backlash about IVF and how can you say you're a
for sure.
Christian and do IVF, like things like that. But honestly, I've gotten quiet and shame on me for it. And that's why we're here today talking.
Right. And I think there are a couple of things you said there that are really impactful.
Yeah.
Sometimes our response will detract from our initial message. I really like that to
Mm,
say it like that because sometimes you can put forward a really good message and then people see the way you react in the comments. So for me, I just delete them. I know some people are
yeah.
like, respond to them. It fuels the algorithm. But for me,
I
I don't
mean,
want to provide a platform for sin to spread, for hate to spread,
yeah.
for
Right.
racism, sexualization, or arguing to spread. There's
Right.
no need to keep that platform
Mm,
open,
no.
to each their own. And then I think something you said there
Very
as well
true.
is denial isn't always just saying no. Sometimes it's just being silent. And I think that's really powerful. And actually I
Yeah.
talk about that a lot with addiction recovery, where
Mm,
addicts sometimes feel if they don't admit to drinking or they get asked and they don't answer, well, not answering isn't saying no, therefore they're not lying about their addiction. And so we
right.
sometimes really twist and try to justify things. But like you said, denial isn't just saying no. Sometimes it's not doing your part, it's choosing to
It's
stay
not
silent.
speaking up or yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
you can definitely be Christian and, live a lifestyle that reflects that without having to preach it or push it towards others. Like I said, a lot of people will just
Yeah.
attach it to what we say or what we do to have a reason to argue. You talk
Oh, sure.
about wanting to be a bit louder and talked about overcoming a lot of different hardships. And I say that all to lead towards this finale here, which is what is the future looking like, the expansion of your platform and what you're doing, and all that you're doing. What do you think the future is shaping up to be, and what are you hoping to see happen?
I really I really feel God. I really feel like deep down I'm supposed to share my story more, louder, like my voice, my face saying it, not just me making a little post with a little paragraph about what happened. I really feel like that I'm supposed to be a source of encouragement for others. Like all of these things I've gone through, and that's something else that has carried me through is that none of these hardships have been for nothing. Like struggling to have children, going through IVF, losing a baby, have like almost dying, having to do all these crazy
Right,
things, and being able to hold on to my faith and 100% trust God, even though I'm sad, I'm upset by his wisdom and what he's chosen to do. I'm like, why did it have to be that way? But okay.
right.
I really think that he's saying, like, he's wanting me to be a source of encouragement for others and to just I have a platform and all this stuff like right like just all this stuff didn't happen for nothing and so and I've had a lot of comments where people have said that they just can't believe that I still believe and that I'm still faithful and I I find that a little different like I'm like wait what do you mean like why
Hmm.
wouldn't I be faithful like don't you know God like but that's just a testament to that's the point is I have while I've been able to keep my faith, it's also made me doubt it's made me doubt myself is what's weird. Is I haven't doubted God through all of this, but I've doubted myself that like
Hmm.
I'm not gonna kind of what I alluded to before. It's like I'm not gonna speak well, so then I'm holding myself back and I feel like that's where the struggle has been the most. But just that I keep saying this too, and I don't know if it's a good analogy, but I feel like Moses, not that I'm great, but
No.
when God was like, go talk to these people, and Moses kept having all these excuses. I'm like, oh hey, that's me, that's relatable. Like I keep being like, well, but
Right,
and
right.
so
Well, and
honestly, this is a first step for me. Coming on
yeah.
this podcast and whatever questions you're going to ask me and just answering them and just getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah,
That's my
so now
goal.
you're a podcast guest, you're a speaker who spoke on stage, you're an influencer, so you've done a lot. I think your testimony is one similar to you talk about people being like, well, how could you be of the faith? And I see that a lot, and I work in the spaces of domestic
Mm,
violence prevention and awareness, same for sexual assault and violence and human trafficking. I just recently attended
yeah.
a gala, and I also hosted the Warriors of Hope book launch, and both of those events, all the survivors there were faith-based. They were filled with trust and faith in, Jesus Christ. And
Mm,
a lot of them were more, in our human terms, seemingly justified to be upset with God because they had been
right.
survivors of, domestic
Mm,
violence, of sexual violence. Some of
yeah.
them were raped in preschool, so hearing those stories and
Yeah.
hearing them still have the faith, it was such a testimony, and there were plenty of people who were like, how can you still have faith through all of that? And, that's
Yeah.
like you said, it's a really huge testimony in itself. And then two things I want to leave and end this with.
Okay.
The first is if you could share a Bible quote with us that, is just speaking to your heart right now. Maybe it's one that you've kind of kept centered throughout your journey or just one that's on your mind. What one would that be?
Hmm. I'm like, that's a hard one because I keep thinking about different things. But actually, the biggest one right now is I'm doing a mother Bible study, and it's
Mm,
talking about all these topics as a mom, and also in relation to your walk with Christ and things like that. And one of them was talking about laying your burdens down at the cross, like laying
mm.
your burdens down. And I'm like, what? I read it and I was like, what does that even mean? Am I doing that? I don't think I'm even doing that. I'm I'm so anxious and worried and stressing out all the time. And Jesus literally says to not be anxious. And it you read that and you think it's such a simple thing. You're like, well, what does that mean? I'm stressed out. What are you saying? But it's like here's a simple answer. And so I really been just trying to sit on that and meditate it. Is like,
Mm.
don't be anxious. He's God takes care of everything. And then laying my burdens down and like giving them to him. And what does that actually mean? And what does that actually look like? And am I doing it?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the ones that we all struggle with the most, which is why,
Yeah.
anxiety, rest, and burdens
Mm,
are mentioned throughout the whole Bible quite a bit. And so I think that's one that
yep.
we all really struggle with, one that I also remind myself of often. And then what I want to leave with was you've done all these different outfits, sandals, dresses, pants, shirts. What has been maybe the number one fashion tip that you have learned throughout all of this? Maybe it's like a certain combination style, maybe it's a color palette, maybe it's just
Mm.
like a trick for better buying. What has been like the most shocking thing you've learned or the most beneficial?
Hmm. That's a hard one. Well, I think maybe it's not actually hard. I would say that the thing that stands out the most is that you don't have to spend a lot of money to look cute. Like you just, and I think that that's a girl thing. Like, it's like every girl wants to feel cute. Everybody wants likes getting dressed up. There are some girls that don't, and that's fine. But that you don't have to buy these super expensive dresses to look nice. You don't have to show off your body to be attractive. And I look back at that and just think of younger Malyri, and I'm like, you just I mean, we could get into a whole topic of modesty, but it's like that's not the type of guy you want in the long run, truly. You want a guy that loves you for your heart and not for what you're showing because he's not going to love you. He's not going to love you. He just likes your body. So that's a whole other topic that we don't have to get into, but um
100%. And for those girls who don't
yeah.
want to look good, there's always the Marine Corps.
Do you see?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah, you want to look real ugly? Just I'll put my blues on. You can put your
yeah, I was gonna say, Mallory, definitely email me some military pictures of you to use for the thumbnail
yeah.
cover. But yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing your story, your first
Yeah.
podcast outside the one you recorded with your husband and never published, so
Oh yeah, I
thank
didn't know
you.
about that.
He told me about that because we were talking about how it was your first one officially. So super glad to have you here. I'd love to see you
Yeah.
breaking out of your shell to talk about this stuff. I think
Thank you.
it's important. There's a lot of people more than we realize who are struggling with conception. I think a lot of
Oh yeah.
people maybe don't bring it up or share it. Like you
Hmm.
said, how do you share it
Yes.
without sounding like you're pitching, like, hey, can you be a surrogate mother? Or maybe some people are grossed out by it, or you don't want to
Mm.
ruin people who are having good pregnancies, in your head. So I think it's something
Yes.
that, as we talk about it, it can be a conversation that's had more, which leads to awareness, better resources, more comfort. And so I really thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. And just because we didn't name it, I'll have it in the description below, but could you share some of your handles and social media for people to check out?
Yeah, you can find me pretty much everywhere, and it's just at Cheap Chic Finds.
Can you spell chic?
Chic. Chic is CHIC.
Yeah, not a QUE
Chic.
for anyone who's yeah. So, but thank you. We're gonna add that in the description below for people to check out all of your, as you have said, cute outfits, and they can be the determination of that. But
Yeah, right.
yeah, and hopefully y'all can find something to wear. Summer season is coming up, so a lot of good finds. Although it's still springtime. You and I
Yeah,
are Floridians and Georgians,
we're
so
sweating.
it's already summer. But wherever
Yeah,
you are, the new spring and summer collections are out. But this also works year round for some good deals on early winter savings and all that. So,
there you
Mallory,
go.
thank you for what you're doing, and thank you so much for your time
Yeah.
today.
Thank you. Have a good one.